They're looking crazy. Let me see if I can try to fix this really quick before I officially start the video. So today, I'm gonna let a few people come in. I guess that looks all right. Let me fix this one light. Hold on. Oh man. Okay. Hopefully that's a little bit better. It's okay. This live camera kind of sucks, but we're gonna make do. So today, we're gonna talk about the spiritual lessons that 2020 has offered us as a human collective. And to those of you that are watching in the future, we're going to be doing this a little off the cuff today. So maybe, just grab a cup of coffee, enjoy the convo. So I wanted to do a bit of a year review on 2020. It seems like the common social conversation of it is that 2020 is one of the most difficult years that we've ever experienced. And while there may be truth in that, I would also like to offer the idea that 2020 has actually given us more spiritual lessons than any other year. And I wrote down on my iPad just a list that you can't see, a list of stuff that I want to cover in this video. And as we go forward, I would love to see any reactions or comments come through the comment section just to, I'd love to hear your reaction and hear how you feel about this stuff as well. So top of my list is, I'm going to try to talk in code a little bit in this video because I don't want to totally get demonetized here. So I'm going to label something the CV. I think you guys can intuit what the CV is. It's obviously that thing that we wear these for. So the CV has taught us many things this year. At the top of my list for what the CV has taught us is critical thinking and learning how to follow our intuition. It's put right at the center of our social dialogue, this conversation about truth and misinformation. And we're going to get into censorship, we're going to get into all of these other subjects, but to stay focused on the critical thinking and the intuition, the CV has given us this year the opportunity to realize that we are able to discern things within our beings. And when we use our internal GPS, we can come to conclusions that are in alignment with truth and with our higher states of consciousness. As we're able to perceive all of these pieces going on, we can see that there's truth there, we can see that there's lies over there. And all of this is good because it teaches us the main tool that we need to forge as spiritually awakening beings is the tool of discernment. So at the top of all of this, at the top of my list, spiritual discernment, I think, is one of the biggest gifts that we have been given in 2020. Next on my list, I have the election. The election taught us that no one is going to save us externally, that we have to save ourselves, that we have to free ourselves. When the election was going on, the biggest thing that I saw was that as a nation and as a body of people, as the human collective, we are all too eager to try to find a side to say that this side is right and this side is wrong. But when you live with that type of mentality, you are actually splitting your consciousness into duality. Whereas the opposite of this is a consciousness rooted in unity, which can only be heart-based consciousness. So the election revealed to us our own tendencies to want to live in this type of divisive, dualistic mindset. And I think that that's a wonderful lesson for humans to learn, that living in duality is not going to manifest the 5D. It's not going to manifest the new earth. It's not going to manifest this new reality where everybody works in unison with each other. I see Cassia says heart-based unity consciousness. Exactly. That's what it's all about here. Coming back to the heart, getting out of the dualistic mind and seeing this group as evil and that group as good. Because the truth is, when things are actually relative, like they typically are, In this conversation about politics, you have the Republicans, you have the Democrats. The Republicans say the Democrats are good. I'm sorry, the Republicans say the Republicans are good, the Democrats are evil. And then the opposite, the Democrats say the Republicans are evil. But we have to find a way as a human collective to live and perceive life beyond that type of dualistic split. And when we do that, we're actually moving back into our heart. We're moving to a higher level of perceiving this world. And we call that the 5D. We call it the new earth. We are forging our own new path. We're building our own new path to coming back to heart-based consciousness, rooted in unity, forgiveness, and love. And that is the secret that no one is telling you in the mainstream news, in the mainstream narrative, that we're actually building a new way of being human. When we say phrases like raising our consciousness, or living in the 5D, or building or moving to a new earth, what we're talking about is a new form of consciousness, a new way of being human that previously we have never explored. So again, I just put a bunch of stuff down here on this list that I want to talk about. They're not in any specific order. I'm just going to keep going as I originally wrote them down. So next I have the idea that the people that may have lost their jobs this year, perhaps there's a group in this group of people that it's actually opened them up to see more opportunity in their life, to realize that perhaps they were living a type of pre-packaged corporate lifestyle that wasn't really resonating with the deeper truth of their soul, who came here as a creator being. And so by losing their job, it triggers a certain type of dark night of the soul, where it then is asking them, what is it that you really want to do with your life? Were you really happy in that job that you had? Now, of course, losing a job is a very traumatic experience, especially when there's so many external factors that have played into that, government shutdowns and whatnot. But I think there's a silver lining to anybody that has lost their job. It's giving you an opportunity to really come back to your center and ask yourself, what is important? What is essential in my life? That's another point that I have written down here, is the conversation about how our government has labeled certain businesses and groups of people as essential versus non-essential. Well, I think this question is deep inside of the human soul, is what is essential in my life? Not just as a business or as an economy, but what is essential for me as an evolving human being? We're going to get more into that. So let's see what the next one was. The next one is losing friends. As those of us in the consciousness raising community have began speaking up to try to show people that the narratives going on out there in the mainstream, whether it's coming just purely from the media or from our governmental leaders, these narratives are subconsciously telling us that we don't have any intrinsic power or any intrinsic value. As the creator beings that we are, we know that that's false. And so this year has put the question of our sovereignty right at the forefront. And it's giving you the opportunity to ask yourself who you are. Are you a sovereign being that is able to make life decisions based on all of the information that you see out there and all of the misinformation that you see out there? You're being given the opportunity to utilize your tool of discernment, and only a sovereign being utilizes the tool of discernment. So this year has given you an opportunity to ask yourself, am I a sovereign being? And how do I discern all of this information that's going on out there? I'm sorry, I got a little sidetracked from the idea of losing friends. So you see, this is why I keep notes, because my brain goes all over the place. So as those of us in the consciousness-based community have began talking about those subjects and trying to point out how there's censorship going on of actual truth, and we need to be looking at that, and how this other stuff that is becoming wildly popular in the mainstream is actually false. As we try to speak up and we're genuinely trying to help people, we have our own friends, my own friends, have been pushing back with the cognitive dissonance that this brings up for them And it's resulted in me losing some friendships. And I'm sure many of you out there can actually connect to that idea too. It's very difficult when we're trying to align ourselves with truth, but all of the people out there are so programmed by the media matrix and the mainstream that they will actually fight you. You see, there's a scene in the Matrix where once Morpheus and Neo are back in the Matrix, Neo has just woken up from the Matrix, and they re-enter the Matrix, and now Morpheus is going to try to teach Neo a few lessons about the Matrix. There's this scene where they're walking through, hey Alyssa, I see you. There's this scene where they're walking through a crowded street, and all of these people are walking towards them, and Morpheus says, so many of these people are so asleep, so helplessly involved and in love with the Matrix that they will actually fight you to maintain it. And that is the truth of this Matrix mindset. Those that are deeply invested, if even on a subconscious level, into this Matrix will actually fight you. And so the result is that we lose friends and we lose the people that we care about. But at the same time, there's a flip side to this. At the same time that we're losing friends, we're clearing space and we're attracting in those new friends and new community that are going to uplift us, that are going to be able to build with us. As you know, as the election has put this phrase out there of build back better, which to me is like nails on a chalkboard, mostly just because I hate pre-programmed speech. I'm going to invert this idea to building back better. What that actually means is building your tribe. You're going to build your tribe back better than ever before. As you lose your friends and the people that are kind of fair weather friends in your life, you're going to attract in a whole new community of people. And that's what 2021 has in store for you. Your magnetism begins to grow, and the people that should be around you will now be attracted into your life. And most of this year, in 2020, I've seen how this has happened in my life and in my new friends' life. We've all gone through a certain type of death of our social circles that we were involved with. And now we're going to be elevating ourselves into a new social circle, living on the new earth. I'm seeing a few comments. Let me read those quickly. Our Lizard says, infinitely grateful for others speaking their truth. Grateful I found your channel, hoping to find more like you in real life. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. It's true. I mean, it's pretty wild that our real worlds have shifted so much. But I love your point there on gratitude, because gratitude is going to be like a compass. It reprograms your entire vibration to attract in more things to be grateful for. So gratitude, it's a big point. Let's move on. Looking back on 2020 from the future will reveal that this was the greatest year for human awakening. 2020 was the dark night of the soul for the human collective. That's what I believe has been going on this entire year. If you're part of the consciousness rising movement, and you've been a part of this movement for, let's just say, the last 5, some of us maybe 10 years, some of us maybe even more. For me, my major dark night of the soul happened in about 2010, 2011. And then that triggered a 3 to 5 year window of extreme awakening and raising of my consciousness, to be able to see all of these pieces on the chessboard and see what type of game is actually being played here in the 3D landscape. So 2020, I believe, is the year that the human collective is now going through this dark night of the soul. And I just explained what the dark night of the soul is, but to make it more clear, it's the moment where your entire life falls apart and you reach this kind of existential crisis of what am I going to do now? And then if you lean on spirit during this dark night of the soul, you will be transformed. You will be uplifted to a new level of consciousness and understanding that you previously you were not aware of. And that is what I believe has been going on all throughout 2020. As people have been losing their jobs and their businesses, they've been distancing from family and friends and not able to travel freely. This has triggered this type of existential crisis of who am I now? In the face of all of this garbage going on, who am I? And that question is at the core of the dark night of the soul. And so I'm so grateful that humanity as a collective is now being given the opportunity to ask themselves this question. And I think when we get years down the road, we're going to look back on this moment in time as the moment where the human collective took a shift. They took a shift into raising their consciousness. They took a shift into taking the responsibility of their own health and putting it back on their shoulders. They took a shift of aligning with truth and always trying to speak with truth. This has never happened before. Humans as a collective have never gone through this. It's always been individuals here and there, here and there. But now it's the human collective that is actually going through this dark night of the soul. And so I find that to be very intriguing. You know, nothing is guaranteed. We have no idea what the future is going to hold for us. But my belief is that because we're going through this dark night of the soul, we've been expanding as a collective. We've been expanding consciousness. And the ripple effects of that into our future are going to be so big that I think in a few years it'll become obvious that 2020 was the year that started all of that. I got a few comments. Let's see what you guys are saying. Lizard says, yes, my name means rebirth, and that is what is happening internally and externally. I believe that we will rise like the phoenix. Yeah, 100%. 100%. I mean, rebirth is a huge theme that is going on in the year of 2020, especially on a collective level. And Cassia says, definitely the dark night of the soul for the whole collective and individually. Lots of waking up, 2020 vision. Yeah, 2020 vision, baby. And Alyssa, yeah, I agree. Darkness first, shedding, and then expansion. That's it. You guys are on it. More people have woken up to see how the TV and politicians mind program us and manipulate us now more than ever before. 2020 was, no, wait, I'm right here. It has set an example. Wait, no, where am I reading from? More people have woken up to see how the TV and politicians mind program us and manipulate us than ever before. They lie and tell us to live one way while they turn around and live another way. And then the phrase that keeps coming up is rules for thee, but not for me. This theme is very, very interesting and I think extremely transformative for the human collective. You see, if you rewind the clock, it's been easy for politicians in the past to put out these rules for the people and then live a separate, hypocritical way in their personal life. And now as we've reached 2020, we have this peak of technology where we're able to perceive the world around us in such a deeper and more profound way. And so what's coming to the surface now this year over and over and over is we have certain governmental leaders that say, you can't do this, you can't do that, but yet they turn around and they go do that. So they violate their own rules. Now, the reason why I think this is a good thing for humanity to perceive is, again, it's going to wake up people to ask themselves the question of, do I trust my leaders? And if you're anything like me, I believe that having a healthy skepticism and a healthy pessimism of our governmental leaders is a wonderful thing. I think that we should never just kind of sit back and complacently believe that our government is going to be doing the best thing for us. I'm not saying that we should be cynical and say our government is proactively out to, enslave us. However, I think having a healthy skepticism of what our leaders say is a good thing for humanity. It means that it's activating, again, your power of discernment, your ability to perceive the reality around you and try to put the pieces together for yourself. So the more that we see our politicians lie and be caught in corrupt loopholes, I think it's going to give us a more and a deeper way of awakening, again, our own discernment and our sovereignty. This is really the core message of 2020, is the message of sovereignty and discernment. With businesses being told to shut down, it has inspired business owners to stand up to this government overreach. It has set an example of our real freedoms. You see, we live in a we live in a country where the people are actually above the government, and yet the government is trying to tell the people what to do. And so there's this type of inversion that is going on. And most people actually believe that that inversion is the reality they live in. They actually believe that the government has the right to tell them what to do, when in fact there is no constitutional basis for that. The way I perceive our our leaders that are trying to tell the businesses what to do, is that that should be a recommendation. They're legally speaking, and again, this is for entertainment purposes, but legally speaking, the government has no right to tell any business to shut down. They have every right to recommend it. They have every right to say, hey, this is our informed opinion, but they have no right to physically board up these places. And so as we've seen out there in the landscape of America, certain businesses really pushing back on that narrative, what is being revealed is that they are legally in the right to not shut down. And so I think this is a wonderful lesson that we're learning. And these brave business owners that are doing this, they're risking everything. And in their lesson, they're actually showing us how we can behave as sovereign individuals, and that we don't have to succumb to a random piece of paper that says you have to shut down your business or that you can't go here or go there. I believe that we should listen to our leaders like a king listens to his informers. You are a king, you are a queen. You are the sovereign in your world. So listen to the informers, hear what they have to say, and then, as the king of your reality, make your decision. It's yours. This is your world to play with. Don't let them tell you what to do. I saw another comment from Lizard. She says, sovereignty, great term for me to keep in mind. 100%. That term is going to take you a long way. Next, the media lies, hides, and censors. The more it lies, hides, and censors, it reveals the truth that they are afraid of. It also reveals that lies are their currency. So one major lesson we've seen in 2020 is the ramp up of social media censorship. The ramp up of, not just on the social media page, on that page, but on the page of mainstream. We've been able to see, those of us that are starting to awaken our consciousness to a higher level, we're able to perceive the stories that the mainstream just doesn't even talk about. For instance, Jeffrey Epstein, that was a major story that a lot of people didn't want to talk about. For instance, the Hunter Biden laptop, that was a major story that the mainstream media just straight ignored. And now here we are a month or two later, and it's being validated. So these type of examples, I think, are good for us. They keep showing us that we can't trust these forms of authoritarianism, which is social media companies and mainstream news. We can't just blindly trust them. We have to learn how to discern truth for ourselves. And so as we've seen social media censor more and more things, we're starting to actually get help. We're getting the help to see that, oh, this is the truth that they're afraid of. And now we have a higher form of understanding. Like, I have to use a code here, but you guys know that, how do I put it into a code? That hydrox, you know, that drug, that thing that was going on back in the summer? Remember those doctors that came out and spoke? There was 20-some doctors that gave that presentation of their scientific findings on that drug and how it was helping their patients. And yet the very next thing that happened was within 24 hours, Google, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter all scrubbed that video from the internet. The mainstream wouldn't even talk about it. And immediately they shifted their narrative to how one of those doctors said whatever she said years ago about having sex in dreams with demons. The reason why this is a great situation for the awakening of human consciousness is because, again, it shows you how their only trick is not to actually discredit the truth. They had no way of discrediting the scientific findings that they were presenting. So what they did was immediately spin it into a narrative specifically designed to get you to just stop talking about that. And so that is a great thing for those of us on the human awakening, on the consciousness awakening, because now we're seeing this is something that they are actually afraid of, that we should be talking about, that we should be shining light on. There's no reason why a non-scientific corporation like Google would want to censor a scientific community of doctors that are presenting science. I mean, that's one of the most mind-blowing things I think has happened this year. It's just so clear how biased and how unscientific these corporations actually are. So before I get to the next one, I see another comment from Lizards who says, sorry I'm commenting so much, but yes, discernment and seeing beyond the surface. We must all think for ourselves, and censorship is very real. People need their own websites, etc., and freedom of thought. Yeah, first of all, I love that you're commenting so much. This whole thing is a dialogue. And second of all, yeah, it's giving us the opportunity to reinvent even the internet as we would like to see it. If YouTube's going to shut it down, well, guess what? There's other websites that we can go to. If we know that Facebook is literally just pirating all of our private and personal information and selling it to other corporations so that they can advertise to us just to get us to buy their shit, if we don't like that, well, guess what? 2020 has brought right to the forefront of your consciousness that this is going on. We don't have to use these corporations on the internet. You see, this is another lie that hopefully 2020 is waking us up to. We don't have to actually use Facebook. We don't have to use YouTube. Yes, of course it's convenient. Look at me, I'm still here on YouTube. I'm still on Instagram. I do that stuff. I'm definitely not saying cut it out today. I'm not trying to like ring a certain alarm bell. What I'm trying to say to you is that we don't even believe that we have options. We might somewhere inside of our consciousness know that we have options on the internet, but we don't go there. We don't go to Parler. We don't go to BitChute. We don't go to these other places. And yet 2020 is making it more clear now than ever before that we need alternate platforms on the internet to become popular so that we can challenge these censorship platforms. If a platform like YouTube is censoring people, well, guess what? There's not much we can do about that in the sense of changing the YouTube and changing the CEOs or changing the algorithm. But we can take our sovereignty somewhere else. We can put our content on another platform. And that is actually the biggest thing they're afraid of. These companies that are censoring, the way they're going to learn their lesson that they're losing their fan base, we're going to actually teach them a financial lesson by moving our business somewhere else. Our content is our business. Our comments are our business. Our eyeballs, our attention is what is their business. They make money based on our eyeballs and attention. So if you move your eyeballs and your attention to another platform, you're taking your business elsewhere. You're removing it from them. So there's that. Got a few more comments. Yeah, I got a comment saying, I'm just listening to this, not thinking of stuff. Awesome. I don't know exactly what you mean, but great. I'm glad you're here. You say, it's been tough. This year's been tough, but I love the positive things that you highlight. Things I wouldn't have thought if you hadn't pointed it out. You're welcome. That's exactly why I wanted to do this live stream, is to show you that we have been learning some amazing things this year. Okay, yeah, we talked about essential businesses earlier, but I wrote down another thing here that says, our government does not see us as essential. It's revealed more and more how essential we are in their eyes. Because of a lack of support that we've seen on a regular basis with our businesses, we've seen how these businesses are actually the backbone of our community. As the government has started using this term non-essential, which is a really weird, flippant term, I think what's been revealed is actually what is essential. It is those very things that they say is not essential. Local businesses are insanely essential to the health of a local community. Without local businesses, you really cut down on personal connection with your community. You cut down on the health and the wealth of the community that you actually live in. You see, Walmart doesn't live in your community. They might have a place in your community, but if that Walmart shuts down, guess what? They got a million other Walmarts in the world. So they don't give a shit about your community. The communities that are actually being shut down and termed non-essential, turns out are way more essential than a place like Walmart or Home Depot or anything like that, or even Amazon. Instead of buying all of our stuff from these corporations, we need to be buying locally. We need to go to our local restaurants. We need to go to our local shops, because by doing that, we actually ensure the health of the community that we participate with. You see, every dollar that we give this corporate conglomerate that exists in our community, that money goes out of our community. When we give money to Walmart, it goes out of our community. When you give money to a shop in your own town that sells a certain product or that has a certain service like a restaurant, when you give that money to those local businesses, that money goes back into your community. It raises everybody up in your community. So we've seen now through this conversation of what is essential and what's not essential, we've seen that the government does not view us as essential. So it again reveals to us how we must take our sovereignty into our own hands, how we must use the power of God-given discernment within us and challenge these bullshit mandates and lockdown orders. It is through the challenging of that that we're going to see exactly how essential we are. So there's that. I only got a few more points here. The next one on my list is vaccines, which I'm going to try to just use that word that only time, because I don't want to, again, hit the censorship algorithm here on YouTube. But for now, I'm going to call them the jabs. I see Alyssa's comment says every small business is essential. Yes, it is. Okay, so the jabs. Let's talk about the jabs. The jabs have forced us to analyze our own health. There are healthy ways to boost our immunity and take our health into our own hands. It's given us the opportunity to see clearly how the system is using this as a social engineering push through shame culture, leading people to become more defiant and self-responsible. We see that we are the authority of our bodies. This conversation has, for as weird and fearful and strange as the jab conversation has been, it's actually emboldened a whole new section of our community. I remember just a few years ago, the conversations about jabs was really small. And I only had that conversation with people that were either on the actually on the human awakening, consciousness awakening path, or maybe they were parents that were really having to ask themselves this hard question. They were parents of young children and trying to discern for themselves what they wanted to do with the idea of a jab. So what's fascinating about this year is as that conversation has gotten louder and louder and louder, and shame culture around jabs has become louder and louder, it's given us the opportunity to awaken a larger community of people that are now questioning the virility of that argument of, is a jab safe? Is it necessary? What do we know about it? Does the government have the right to mandate this? Does that violate our constitutionally protected rights? All of those questions are wonderful questions to ask, and we need to go deeper and deeper down that rabbit hole of asking those questions. It's revealed how the mainstream media and social media and the mind program people in the matrix, it's revealed how they think. And the way that they think about this is that if you ask a critical question, you're actually anti-jab. But you're not anti-jab by asking, hey, what actually is in this? Is that anti? Or is that just using, again, your sovereign power of discernment? Because you're about to get a jab into your body. So shouldn't you want to know, how is this going to affect my body? How is this going to affect my future? Does the government have the right to make this decision for me? By asking those questions and then having the mainstream call you anti is hilarious. Like it just purely reveals how they don't want you to think for yourself. See, I believe that the more dialogue we have about something, the more truth gets revealed. The lies will be revealed and the truths will be revealed the more we talk about something. So anytime the mainstream doesn't want you to talk about something, that is a good and clear indicator that there's a part of that conversation that is not going to completely match up with the narrative, excuse me, the narrative that they're trying to perpetuate and that they're crafting. So it's good, this, this ability to be a critical thinker and to ask these questions is definitely a very positive thing that I think is going on in us. There's another topic here that has been probably the most heated and divisive topic of the year, which is the topic of riots and protests. Riots and protests have revealed the push for communism and Marxism. Those with eyes to see now comprehend the covert push for this. Tearing down statues, rioting, protesting, not protesting, because you see the media has called this protesting, but when you bash a window in and you steal shit from inside of that building, it's not a protest. That's called vandalism. So, but to go on, tearing down statues and destroying buildings. Also, the idea of critical race theory has now been kicked out of the US government and the UK government. That just happened in the past week, or at least I saw that in the past week on YouTube. And the UK government has declared critical race theory to be unprovable science. And I think that that's a wonderful thing because it is an unprovable science. All it does is try to get white people to say that they're the problem when in fact they might actually have been incredibly altruistic their whole lives, but now because of their skin color, they have to get mind programmed to see themselves as an oppressor. Unless you're an oppressor, you don't need to be mind programmedly and convinced that you are an oppressor. I mean, critical race theory is too hard for me to really talk about in just a few minutes here, but it's been astonishing to see the rise of that really messed up ideology. But what I love that's happened at the end of 2020 is that America has now kicked out critical race theory from being institutionalized through our federal government, and the same has just occurred in the UK. So I think that's a wonderful thing. But also you have had critical race theory being taught in schools this year. And BLM has actually given new curriculum for schools to teach based on critical race theory. And now we've had parents that didn't know their children were learning this at school. They've gotten shaken awake. And they've now seen, holy crap, my child is going to school and learning things that I fundamentally disagree with, or that turns my child into either a victim or some sort of apologizer for things that they're not actually involved with. So I think that that's been an amazing thing that has happened, is now this communism and Marxism push going on in our culture has been really on the back burner, or like the subconsciousness of our collective consciousness for the last few years. I've been perceiving it out there since at least 2016 and 2015. And it's been kind of this slow burn. But now as this year has unfolded, those people have become even more emboldened to push their communist and Marxist agendas in a way more, what's the word? Just obvious way. And that's actually a wonderful thing, because again, as long as the dark stays in the dark, we don't know that it's there. But when the dark comes to the light, we can then perceive it, and then we can change it. So the fact that we can now perceive that there is this massive push that is cloaking communism and Marxism and socialism, we can see this push going on. And that is a good thing for humanity, because now we can see what it is that we need to be aware of. We can now see who is aligning themselves with this movement and who is not. And then therefore we can see what leaders we resonate with, because we're able to see how they fall in this spectrum as well. But yeah, it's been really strange to see how these social movements of racial injustice have been perverted and twisted away from actually helping to implementing communism, implementing Marxism. And I mean, just as a quick example, one of the most crazy, astonishing things that I saw take place this year was when the statues started coming down in Portland, Oregon, which is where I grew up. I thought it was super weird when they tore down George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. But then when they eventually, months later, tore down Abraham Lincoln, that was when I realized that their agenda doesn't make any sense. It's not rooted in anything that is actually revolutionary. Their agenda is just rooted in pure rage because it doesn't make any sense. Why would people that are saying on one side that they want more tolerance, they want more social inclusivity of these discriminated against minority groups, why would those people go out and tear down a statue of Abraham Lincoln, who is the president that actually opened up the ability for legal equality in our country? It just shows that all they're after is actually burning it down. And that's a phrase that has been strangely parroted by a lot of friends of mine this year, that the system is so corrupt, we just have to burn it down. Well, guess what? That is not an idea that is in alignment with the forging of the path for the new earth, for the raising of consciousness. You don't raise consciousness by setting a city on fire. That has never happened in the past. That's not how Martin Luther King did it. That's not how John F. Kennedy did it. That's not how John Lennon did it. That's not how Gandhi, Mother Teresa, that's not how any of our great leaders in the past have ever created lasting social change. Not a single one of them did it by breaking windows and spray painting Capitol buildings and defacing statues and burning American flags. Do you think that Martin Luther King wanted to burn an American flag? Maybe that crossed his mind, but you know what he ultimately knew and used in his heart that became completely unstoppable by the government in the 60s was that love was going to be the ultimate force for change. That's what's happening in 2020. That's what's going to happen in 2021. We're going to start seeing more and more and more how love is not this pansy, hopeful, imaginative idea that is not rooted in reality. We're going to see firsthand how people respond to leaders that are based in love versus leaders that are based in fear and hatred. We're going to see it. We're going to see people as a collective follow those leaders that are leading from a place of actual change, not just destruction. Because yeah, of course, if you destroy a building, then you've changed it. But that doesn't mean you've changed the ideology that built that building in the first place. If you want to get to the core of something, you have to speak to somebody's heart. You have to bypass the dualistic mind, which says you're right, I'm wrong, and I'm wrong, or I'm right and you're wrong, and all of that polarization thought. You have to bypass that. The only way to bypass that is by speaking the language of the heart, which is unity consciousness, learning how to bring both sides of this dysfunction together to see what is a new way that we can reimagine our lives together that'll be better for us in the long run. That's something that we have to do, and that's something that has been started this year. And as this idea of race has been pushed into the forefront more and more and more, what's become exceedingly clear to me is that racism is actually in the best position it's ever been, meaning this year has revealed to us the sheer numbers, the amount of people that are actually in support of other people that are beyond their race. We've seen now this year more and more races coming together to say racism is bullshit. That has happened, and yet, again, the mainstream media always trying to invert things. What they say is that white supremacy is at an all-time high. They will try to make this conversation about racism the most inverted and fucked up that it's ever been. They'll tell you that white supremacy is the worst it's ever been, that racism is at an all-time high, when in truth, when you even just look at these protests, there's more white people there supporting black people than there were in any previous protests and riots in the past. When you go back to the 60s, the amount of white people that came out to support these racial movements was so much smaller than where it is today. And yet we're told that white people are more racist than ever before. Now look, our world is fucking complicated. and shit is not easy. However, it is clear if you just mute the television and mute the narrative that we're being sold day after day after day, what I see when I look into my friend groups is the number one thing I see is that we want to love each other. We want to support each other. And we don't let petty things like skin color actually get in the way of just being a nice person. That doesn't really exist on a mainstream level. It actually exists in these subcultures of our culture. It doesn't exist in the mainstream. And yet, if you just follow the narrative, that's the number one problem of 2020. But what I see is that we're learning how to come together. We're actually learning how to be one body of human consciousness. And that's the only way we're going to actually build a new earth. So I think I'm reaching the end of everything that I've written down here. The last thing that I wanted to mention was just that homeschooling is actually becoming a more popular idea, and people are now learning to create their own educational systems, their own community. And I haven't talked about this too much on my channel, but I was actually homeschooled my entire life. I was homeschooled all the way up until college. And I'm so grateful for that because it has completely set up my mind and my future to be way different than most people I come into contact with. There's a certain level of institutionalized matrix mind programming that I did not have to undergo, and then therefore I did not have to deprogram myself from. And then there's also a level where I was given more free time to be creative as a kid. My school days consisted of about 4 hours of schoolwork, and then I spent the rest of my day learning how to play piano. And then by the time I was in high school, I was extremely proficient at piano. And then once I entered college, I was able to go to a music college down in California and got plugged into the music industry and became a successful and professional musician by age 19. I would not have been able to do that if it wasn't for two main elements. One, being homeschooled so that I could have the free time to explore a passion like that. And two, having the parents that I have. They were so supportive, and being musicians themselves, they were able to teach me how to treat music as a profession, not just a hobby. But as I see the homeschooling movement rising in our collective awareness, I think it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. It's going to set up the next generation of our youth to be more independent thinkers, more critical thinkers. It's going to give them the power of discernment. And also, I believe when you go through the homeschooling process, it actually teaches you how to learn things for yourself. You see, as I've become an adult, I've never stopped this hunger for learning things. But what I saw when I was in college was there was a burnout of being forced to learn things that never mattered to me, and having to just memorize a fact or a statement verbatim so that I could get it right on a test. What I've seen in a lot of my friends is this kind of burnout of learning, because the learning process was never actually taught to them. You see, people that have gone to school, they think that they were taught how to learn things, but no, they were taught what to know. They weren't taught how to learn, and that's a very different mechanism in the psyche of the human. Being taught how to learn something for yourself, being taught how to be your own teacher, is actually a huge lesson for consciousness as we rise it on the planet. Instead of just being told something and then regurgitated back out. It's a very different mechanism in the human mind. So I'm going to wrap it up there. I think I saw a few comments. Just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Yep. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today and for listening. If there's any last minute things you want to say, go ahead and put them in the comments now, and I'll answer them before I bounce out of here. But yeah, I'm going to end this wrap up of 2020 on a personal note. I'm going to make it about me for a second. Personally, this year has been rather challenging. It's been, for everybody, but for me, it's been challenging. It's been strange to watch the energies swirl on a daily basis, and how some days it feels like we're moving forward towards the new earth, and on other days it feels like we're destroying everything and creating our post-apocalyptic reality. But as I've gotten to the end of this year, it becomes clear to me that There's a knowing within me that knows beyond a shadow of a doubt that what is happening this year is the dark night of the soul, and that the end result of that, what's going to be happening throughout the next year or two, is we're going to be restructuring the world into a way that has never existed before. So all of the old patterns of coercion and secrets and lies, all of that is dying. The old world that is based on force is dying. What is happening now is a rebirth of human consciousness. And so there's been a knowing within my heart that has become louder and louder that I hold on to more closely now than ever, which is this tiny voice that says, you're doing great. Just wait. Just you wait and see. This is going to be one of the most amazing stories that we could ever have chosen to live through. And we're right at the forefront. And if you're a starseed, if you're an old soul, then know that this moment is exactly what you came here for. There's an entire planet that needs to wake up. And it's only going to happen by those of us out there that are setting an example of what it means to actually live in the heart. You see, we should use our brain for thinking. We should use our heart for living. Our brain is not even that good at thinking. It really just should be used as a categorizing tool and maybe an organizing tool. But the heart is where we should live when it comes to our discernment. When we're trying to make those deep decisions about what am I going to do with my life? Maybe you've lost your job. Maybe a relationship has ended, either a lover or a friendship or a family member. When confronted with these big, overwhelming decisions like 2020 has done with us, the heart is where you're going to find the best guidance. It's going to be the still small voice, that whisper that guides you onto the next step of your path. And that if you follow that, you will be manifesting the next step of your path in unity consciousness. And when you manifest in unity consciousness, you're not going to manifest duality. Duality means you manifest something you love and something you don't love at the same time. Unity consciousness is manifesting a unified whole that has no opposite. And guess what? Love has no opposite. If you want to deep dive into that idea, there's a video on my channel. I believe it's just titled that, Love Has No Opposite, or Truth Has No Opposite, something like that. But love has no opposite. Unity does not have opposites. Duality, divisiveness, that is the creating point of opposites. But unity is a synthesizing, bringing together into a oneness. And so that's what I believe we're moving towards. Hopefully in the next year, we're going to start seeing more evidence of this taking place in our reality. But thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching. I hope that you got something out of this video. Thank you to everybody who left a comment in the live stream. If you're watching this in the future, leave a comment down below and let me know what you thought. And I'll see you in 2020. I got a lot of fun ideas planned for next year. So make sure you subscribe and stick around the channel. And also, I should have said this way earlier, but I'm releasing new music on January 1st. I'll be putting more info about that on my channel. So stay tuned. I got some new music coming out. But until I see you again along the journey, oneness in sound, I am OnenO. Have a beautiful New Year's, and I'll see you next year. Peace out, everybody.